Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Sachin Karnik here. Today is the 23rd of July, 2025. I want to welcome you all to the continuing presentations on the foundations of Angel Wing. I believe we are, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around week 24. Yes, I think this is the 24th presentation on the continuing series on the foundations of Angel Wing. Please do keep in mind that the technical book, which is over 800 pages long, is available as a free PDF. So if you want that, if you want to go through that, I'd be happy to send that to you. Just send me an email or send me a text message, either way, and that way we can get that out to you without any problems at all. So today we're going to go a little bit further from last time and try to unravel one of the technical concepts here, and that is about motivation. Motivation is what? What is motivation? Motivation is drive. It's our ability to perform tasks because we have energy within, we have a direction within. And there are two types of motivation. One is called intrinsic motivation, and the other is called extrinsic motivation. Both are very important, very interesting. Intrinsic motivation refers to engaging in a behavior because it is inherently rewarding or satisfying. The motivation comes from within the individual, driven by interest, enjoyment, or a sense of personal challenge. Right? So this is very interesting. In the field of psychology, this has been studied, and it continues to be studied as to what this is all about. Where does it actually come from? Why is that even there? And what is the source of motivation to begin with? Right? So this intrinsic motivation is often characterized by activities that people pursue for their own sake, without consideration for external outcomes or rewards. Individuals motivated intrinsically are more likely to engage in tasks with enthusiasm, perseverance, and a genuine desire to master new skills or satisfy personal curiosity. This is a beautiful situation to be in, state to be in, so that we can actually progress very well towards real joy and happiness in life. Many people do not have intrinsic motivation. They're only directed by extrinsic activity, by extrinsic rewards. And what does that do? That does not lead to the kind of satisfaction that we would like. And that's the big difference. So the extrinsic motivation, you can see it on the screen here. It refers to engaging in a behavior to earn external rewards or avoid punishments. The motivation comes from outside the individual, such as money, grades, praise, or fear of failure. You see, so these kinds of extrinsic motivators are very, very much what people aim for. They aim for that. They go for that. It refers to engaging in behaviors to earn external rewards or avoid punishments. The motivation comes from outside the individual, right? So examples are studying to get good grades, working to earn a paycheck, exercising to receive praise or approval. All of these kinds of are examples of extrinsic motivation. What are some of the key features of this? They are driven by external outcomes. That the motivation is driven by external outcome, often useful for initiating behavior, especially in early stages. It can undermine intrinsic motivation if overused or perceived as controlling. Right? So there's a comparison table here that helps us to understand this point very nicely. And that is that the aspect, source of motivation, internal is interest and satisfaction. External is based on rewards or punishments. If you don't do something, there's a punishment for that. Behavioral goal. What is the behavioral goal in intrinsic motivation? Enjoyment, mastery, self-growth, intrinsic development. Extrinsic motivation, outcome-based, money recognition, things like that. It's based on external outcomes, behavior goals. Sustainability, often longer lasting. So the intrinsic motivation lasts much longer. Intrinsic motivation may stop. That's going to be much more sustained for a longer time. Extrinsic motivation for sustainability is it may stop once the rewards are removed. If the reward is removed, some benefit is removed from outside, then one may not continue in that at all. Example of intrinsic motivation is learning for curiosity. An example of extrinsic motivation is learning for a grade. So there's many applications of this. In psychology, especially in self-determination theory, intrinsic motivation is considered essential for psychological well-being and autonomy. However, both types can be beneficial, particularly when extrinsic motivators are aligned with personal values, a process known as internalization. Right, so it's very, very powerful. Okay, now, having said that, there's a couple more dynamics here that I want to present. Give me just a moment. Let's go down here. Just a second here. Okay. Just a moment here. Oh. Okay, so the summary above captures the essence of intrinsic motivation well. Okay, so that's fine. Now, extrinsic motivation arises when behavior is energized by contingencies outside the activity itself. So the activity, like let's say studying for school, it can have intrinsic joy in that. But when the motivation is extrinsic, then that motivation could be grades, a promotion, other types of approval, right? And so those are called contingencies. That motivation is energized by contingencies. In its most controlling form, the locus of causality is experienced as external. I'm doing this because someone else expects it or because I will be rewarded. Yet extrinsic motives exist along a continuum of internalization. So that's very interesting. So meaning what? External regulation, compliance for reward or to avoid punishment, right? So that external regulation is also happening internally. It's the internal phenomena, but it's coming from the outside. Introjected regulation, behavior driven by internal pressures such as guilt or ego enhancement. So if we have guilt, there's internal pressures of different kinds that can also produce a type of regulation that our behavior changes because of that, because of the internal pressure. And this is a very interesting point because many people are driven in this way. It's very difficult sometimes to not act upon that. It's very difficult at times, simply because introjected regulation is a form of extrinsic motivation in which behavior is controlled by internal pressures rather than external rewards or punishments. While the motivation appears to come from within, it is not fully self-endorsed or aligned with one's authentic values. So indeed, the individual acts out of feelings such as guilt, shame, ego involvement, or the need to maintain self-worth and social approval. Right? So key characteristics of introjected regulation are what? Internal pressure. The person feels they should or must have to perform the behavior to avoid negative feeling or to boost their self-image. Lack of true autonomy. Even though the behavior is internally regulated, it is still controlled and not fully integrated into the self. And conditional self-esteem. The individual's self-worth depends on meeting certain standards or expectations which create tension or anxiety. So these are all very, very interesting points. Now, let's take a look at them a little bit more in more detail here. So I'm going to paste this here. Just a moment. Let's go to Garamond. Hold on 1 second here. All right. I wonder why that's coming like that. Well, for some reason, I don't know why that is. Okay. So, this is a more expanded explanation of the introjected regulation. All right. So, the core definition: introjected regulation is an internally mediated but still controlled form of extrinsic motivation in which a person has taken in external demands, standards, or evaluations without fully accepting them as self-chosen values. Behavior is energized by inner pressures to avoid guilt, anxiety, or shame, or to gain ego reinforcement such as pride or self-approval. Because the standard has not been truly owned, actions feel compelled. I have to do this or I feel bad about myself. Okay, so that is from self-determination theory. Now, the contingent self-esteem and ego involvement. A hallmark of introjection is regulation by contingent self-esteem. One's sense of worth rises and falls depending on meeting the internal standard, but not integrated standard. So this often shows up as ego involvement, striving to prove ability, to avoid failure, to protect self-worth. Success produces a fragile pride. Shortfalls trigger guilt, self-criticism, or shame spirals. Because the underlying contingency remains unexamined, the person strays psychologically, tethered to external evaluators, even in their absence. So this is what this is called contingent self-esteem and ego involvement. It's very interesting. You see, because we all have self-esteem. We all need to feel good about ourselves. But when it is dependent on what others are thinking, others are seeing, we need to know what others are talking about and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily judge ourselves based on that. And that's what's meant by ego involvement, striving to prove ability, to avoid failure or protect self-worth. You see, so when ego gets involved in this, then there is a striving to avoid failure, to prove ability to somebody else, to something else. And that may be needed also at times. It's not like it's not. But it's still a bit different from real intrinsic motivation. Right? So success produces a fragile pride. Shortfalls trigger guilt, self-criticism, or shame spirals. So if one is successful through the ego involvement, it's a fragile pride. It lasts for some time. It can easily be broken. If we judge our happiness based on what others are saying, then we are going to be in trouble. Our happiness is not based on what others are saying. We need to understand what others are saying so we can learn from that. But other than that, one has to do one's duty, one's performance action, irrespective of what others might be thinking. We need to be aware of it, no doubt, but not to create guilt, self-criticism, or anger, or those kinds of emotions which will only hurt oneself because of the ignorance or some deficiency in others. And see, there are people in this world who are interested in finding faults. That's what they love to do. There's a lot of people like that. They have nothing better to do in life, so they'll try to find fault with everything in life. With somebody, something, try to create trouble somewhere. And one has to be aware of this, that this can happen. If that is happening, carefully, tactfully get out of that situation, continue your own development, and tap more into intrinsic motivation. And what will that do? That will promote real growth, real harmony, real benefit in life. Otherwise, we will get so much stuck with what others are saying about us all the time. So if you're in a job, you need to know what others are saying. There's an evaluation process, things like that. No doubt, that's there. But nonetheless, if you've done your best, you've done what's expected and all that, and you've done it with sincerity, then you leave it alone. We don't have control over what other people are thinking, what they're going to perform, what they're going to do. Let them do what they're going to do. All we have right over, duty over, purview over, is the actions we are going to perform. We don't have purview over anything else. So this is what eventually leads to intrinsic motivation. We do the activity for its own beauty, for its own sake. And of course, we are aware of the system that we are in. We're in the human system. The human systems have many subsystems. We all live in those systems. We don't have a choice, really. We have to live in them, or maybe we can modify the system a bit. But that doesn't mean that our self-esteem, self-worth, self-growth is contingent on what others are saying. I mean, this is one of the teachings in the Gita that we've talked about also. Somebody might be blamed, somebody might be criticized. This is to see or praised. Praise and blame are seen in the same light. Extremely difficult, right? How is that possible? It is possible when one recognizes that one's inherent joy is not contingent upon all the externalities. Externalities are there, and people are not thinking about us that much anyway. They're thinking about their lives. No doubt there are some people who are trying to create obstacles or problems and all that, but there's ways to deal with that. Certainly, you have to deal with it if it so happens. It happens in work environments a lot. Somebody's trying to get a promotion, bashing somebody, playing office politics, and this word politics. All this thing goes on in human civilization. And this is why we want to reach self-mastery, so we're not affected by these things. In self-mastery, one is self-luminous. One reaches self-luminosity. That self-luminosity is intrinsic. If that self-luminosity is not based on external validators. External validators do exist, but that's okay. If they're validating, it's okay. If they're not, try to see what their point of view is, try to respond appropriately and leave it alone. There's nothing more to be done. That's the way life goes. 10 people will blame us, and 10 people will criticize us, and 10 people will praise us, and some people will be in love with us, and some people might be doing something twisted around. That's the way life goes. When we interact with people in this world, this is the way life goes. What else do you expect from people in this world? Most of the people are stuck in extrinsic motivation, and many of them are just stuck in terms of their own egocentric activity. So when you interact with them, they are trying to grab something from someone, or they're trying to, do something that is out of their own biases, out of their limited vision. This is how it goes. So one has to be very careful in interacting with the people in the world, because most of the people in the world are motivated extrinsically through their own egocentric focus. And if you know that and you realize that, then one can find out how to interact with them without getting trapped inside their ignorance, into their vortex, and discover one's own inner luminosity. That is a very great realization. Yes, we have to live with the people of the world, so many different kinds, but at the same time, always retract back into your natural self-luminosity, or into your own devotion, into your own connection, into your higher development, and then motivation becomes intrinsic. Even the extrinsic duties, they become intrinsic. Raising a family, taking care of people in the family becomes intrinsic, not just extrinsic. Many times it happens, we want to hear some kind of a affirmative statement about praise or this or that, that even a thank you from someone. It happens, right? We want to hear something good from others. We've done so much for them. Okay, that's fine. We may want that. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Do your duty and move on. Sometimes a situation may come about that you've done everything. Now there's nothing more to do to move on from that situation. This is how intrinsic and extrinsic motivation works. There's a lot of technical research behind it. There's many theories behind it. But without going too much into technical detail, I wanted to present some ideas here. We just have one person online with me here. So if there's any questions or comments, you can please make them here, and then we can stop after that.